I thought this would be an interesting topic for this show because sometimes, I'm still kind of thinking about it a little bit because it's like when you have a show like this where it's just for the hardcore listeners, the ones who are subscribing to the show, it does seem like there's kind of some different topics you could talk about and things that you could get a little bit more inside baseball with, or things that like, okay, I think the hardcores would get this, whereas like the normies may not as much. But I did think this was something worth talking about just because it's, Rob, one of the things that's frustrating about the whole political world is that nobody gets economics. And almost nobody who ever is running for office even has the slightest goddamn clue. And it's so rare. I mean, it's one of the things it's why Ron Paul was such a unicorn. There's a guy running for president who actually understood economics. Dude, I mean, and look, it's probably the overwhelming majority of LP candidates don't really understand economics. You want to go with what Gary Johnson's understanding of economics actually was? It's what is Aleppo pretty much sums it up. And I don't know that Chase understands anything about economics. It's funny because
he understands being a queer. That's right. Paywalled episode.
There you go. Well, I was talking to Brian about it before we started the show, and we were saying, and it's not an exaggeration. It's like you could, if you just read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, you're in the top 5%. That's it. You're one book away from getting it better than any of these people do. And then if you want to just throw a few more books in it, you want to make it to the 1%. It's like read economics in one lesson, read Basic Economics, read How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes by Peter Schiff, and you're in the 1%. I don't know what to say. Don't get me wrong. And I've read. It's not like I'm saying only read the books that agree with me. I've read this other crap too. It's just none of that is real economics. Anyway, there's this J.D. Vance clip from a recent speech, a recent stump speech that he gave. Let's play the clip and then we'll break it down a little.
My friends, I want the American dream as a goal for our children and for our grandchildren. You never hear people talk about the American dream anymore. 4 years ago, you did, because things were going well. And it's just as Donald Trump brought it back when he ran for president before and served as president, he's going to bring it back. We just got to send him to the White House, right? So let's talk a little bit about what we believe in the Republican Party. We believe that 1 million cheap knockoff toasters aren't worth the price of a single American manufacturing job. We believe in rebuilding American factories and rebuilding the American dream, and we're going to stamp more and more products with that beautiful label, Made in the USA. Now,
all right, so there you go. Hey, it is I'll say it's an effective political talking point. And you see the whole crowd there chanting USA. That's right. 1,000 cheap toasters isn't as good as one, manufacturing job in the United States of America. So, okay, this sounds real nice and it gets people chanting USA, but let's examine what might be some of the flaws in this in this way of thinking. Number one, I don't know if you've noticed this, Rob, but I have, that the phrase 4 years ago is something that gets used a lot in presidential campaigns for fairly obvious reasons, because the president serves a 4-year term. And so a lot of times that'll be the go-to is were you better off 4 years ago today? I haven't heard that a lot in the Trump campaign. And J.D. Vance used it here. I think there's a reason why a lot of people don't use it. I do feel like this has to be pointed out first, that weren't you doing great 4 years ago today, Rob? Isn't that a weird that you're we were locked in our homes. 4 years ago, we were locked in our homes while Donald Trump was president. I'm sorry, that's a pretty tough thing to ignore. when you're going how great the economy was 4 years ago. It actually wasn't such a great economy. People were getting $1,200 checks to try to hold them over. You know what I mean? For like bills for the next however long. So I don't think people were doing great there. But look, this idea that we actually care about America. We actually care about how people are doing economically. And so what do we turn to? Protectionism. That's the solution here, right? That we don't want this cheap crap coming in from primarily China. We want American manufacturing jobs. Let's get into that a little bit. Let's get into this. So especially because, you know, as we talked about on the last episode, if you guys have watched this, or 2 episodes ago, JD Vance is saying, hey, we should like, whatever his proposal is exactly, we should expand the child credit, the child tax credit or something like that. Like people who have kids, we want to help them. And how do we help them? Well, we make the costs of what they have to pay for taxes lower, right? Because that's what helps people, making their costs lower. This is not rocket science. If you think about it, it's like if you have a bill, it's lower. If your rent is $2,000 a month and you could make that $1,000 a month, that would really help because then you're paying less. Paying less is helpful to people. And obviously, JD Vance and Donald Trump have been running against the inflation of the last few years, the price inflation, because prices going up hurts people. Have we not seen over the last few years how devastating it is for Americans when their prices go up? And yet, when it comes to the topic of trade, it's always like there's this kind of disturbing like dismissal of cheap consumer goods as like, oh, what do we need? A bunch of cheap toasters? You know, when really, Rob, we're not just talking about toasters, right? I mean, even if you were just talking about like kitchen appliances or something like that, it wouldn't just be toasters. It'd be like everything, like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, if all of the items that one needs to purchase in order to live a reasonably normal standard of living for 2024 were far more expensive, that would really hurt people. Why doesn't that part count? You know what I mean? Like, why are those prices not? And imagine to think, like, even just in the example that he used, like, we'd rather we'd rather one American manufacturing job than 1,000 cheap toasters. So, like, one person gets a job, but 1,000 people have to pay more for their toasters. And again, it's not just toasters, is it? It's going to be paying more for basically everything. How exactly does that help people? You can jump in here and add any other. There's a few, different angles to go with this, but like, isn't this? It's just like, it's painful how much you guys don't get it.
How are they going to win the next election when 1,000 people are sitting around in the morning going, God damn it, in the last economy, at least I could afford to toast my bread.
Yeah, right.
I'm just here with, sorry to take the Lord's name in vain. I try not to do that, especially for this Christian audience of ours.
Well, that's blasphemous.